Hi, I am Ashutosh. Welcome to Fault Lines. The year was 1947. A lawyer from Britain named Cyril John Radcliffe came to India. He hardly knew anything about the country, nor did he have the time and desire to know. He came to India on a momentous job and was given only 5 weeks to complete it. So he set about it at once. He shut himself in a house. He was given outdated maps and incorrect census data. He pored over them for a few weeks and then drew lines on the map of India. And that's how Pakistan was created. And while the lawyer was working feverishly, suffering from the oppressive heat of India and bouts of dysentery, millions whose fate he was going to decide were waiting anxiously, quite unaware whether they would be part of India or Pakistan. And when the decision was announced, many of them found themselves on the wrong sides of the border, Hindus and Sikhs in Pakistan and Muslims in India. Their homes where they had been living for generations overnight became a foreign country. Their own neighbors, friends and townsmen became their enemies and thirsted for their blood. They grabbed their children and whatever belongings they could and headed for the land which was to be their own country, a land in which they had never set foot before. More than 15 million people became homeless and refugees. More than 1 million were massacred. The tragedy, one of the worst in human history, was how India and Pakistan celebrated their births as modern nations. There were a few reasons why Pakistan chose to separate from India, but the most important reason was the policy of the colonial British government. It's a policy which is found in the standard rule book of every imperial power since the times of the ancient Greeks and Romans. Divide and rule, divide et impera as the Romans called it. In order to maintain the minority foreign rule in a country, it's imperative that the country is fragmented along religious, ethnic, tribal etc. lines, and chasm is created between different social groups by playing them against each other. 90 years before the independence of India, in the year 1857, there was a great revolt against the British rule in which both Hindus and Muslims came together and fought against the colonial forces. Britain barely managed to suppress the revolt with a great deal of ruthlessness and violence. The event taught them a lesson. They could not maintain their rule in India anymore unless they deepened and exploited social divisions of the country. Since then, their policy was oriented towards playing Hindus and Muslims against each other, sometimes favoring one group and sometimes other as the occasion demanded. In the first decades of the 20th century, when their struggle against colonial rule was turning into a mass movement, the need for the division was even greater. It was also the time when the idea of nation was being formulated not only in India but other parts of the world. What was to be the basis of a nation? Religion, ethnicity, language? While Europe was debating the issue and perpetrating monstrous level of violence on its own people in the process, other parts of the world, including India, were hammering out their own concept of nation in the context of their own cultural and historical backgrounds. While so much blood was being shed on the altar of nation, it was remarkable that Indian mainstream national movement led by Gandhi had a much plural and liberal view of nation. However, there were sectarian political parties as well on the fringes, inspired by the ethnic nationalism of Europe and used by the colonial forces to weaken the mainstream national movement. One of the sectarian parties which claimed to represent the interest of the Muslims was All India Muslim League. It demanded the creation of a new nation for Muslims. The idea was outlandish. How could a nation for Muslims be created when Muslims lived in almost every town and village of India? It was so preposterous that even those who demanded it did not take it seriously. It was used as a bargaining chip by the Muslim elites to gain more power and privileges for themselves, and used by Britain to weaken the national movement for independence. But Pakistan did come into existence, and as it was expected, its creation resulted into the misery of millions. But the immediate and probably the most important reason for its creation was something which is often not talked about. It had more to do with international politics of that time than India's own internal situation. The Second World War had just ended. In the aftermath, the world was divided into two major power blocs, capitalist Western countries and communist Soviet Union, both competing with each other to gain influence in different parts of the world. India, like many other countries struggling to gain independence, did not have much love for the Western world. After all, they were trying to gain independence from the Western world. Britain was aware that after the independence of India, South Asia could fall under the influence of the Soviet Union. So a state which could counterbalance the power of the Soviet Union in the region was a welcome idea. Pakistan fitted the description. A country whose very foundation was religion could hardly keep company of atheist communists. A country whose ruling elite owed its power to the goodwill of the former colonial masters could be expected to do the bidding of the masters as well. After independence, both India and Pakistan went on very different trajectories. Pakistan was to be the homeland for Muslims, even though, ironically, there are more Muslims in India than in Pakistan. On the other hand, India, despite its mind-boggling diversity, or perhaps thanks to that, became a secular and pluralistic nation. India belonged to everyone who lived there, irrespective of their religion, caste, or creed. It embraced democracy as a political system, which, despite its many failings, has been maturing and gaining strength. Whereas democracy is still a pipe dream in Pakistan. Since its inception, Pakistan has been a security state. For most of its 75 years of history, it has been ruled by military dictatorship. Even on some rare occasions, when there were civilian and democratic governments, they were hardly more than puppets installed by the military establishment. In India, the military serves the country. In Pakistan, it's just the other way around. Since the time India and Pakistan became independent, they have been mortal enemies. And the bone of contention between the two countries has been Kashmir. The so-called heaven on earth turned into a hell thanks to Pakistan-backed insurgency and India's counter-insurgency, which have been going on for decades. Pakistan trains and sends armed separatists in Kashmir, and India has a massive army presence to keep those separatists in check. Caught in the middle are the common people of Kashmir. Both the countries have fought 3 wars. Skirmishes are regular occurrences. Both countries have armed themselves to the teeth, which is a massive financial burden for them. But despite the very real antagonism and many differences, India and Pakistan share many common things which can become the ground for better relationships in the future. People in both countries love each other's music, films, literature. The challenges that both the countries face are similar, and so are the solution to those challenges. They are more likely to resolve the outstanding issues between them if they become partners instead of enemies. What is needed is forward-looking, bold, visionary leaderships which have the intelligence and imagination to see that the conflict between them is largely the legacy of the colonial past. If the region has to develop as a whole, India and Pakistan must mend their relationship. Please like, comment and share. And if you like the video, please consider subscribing. Thank you very much for your time.